The silence of space wrapped around Yuna Kim like an old blanket. She drifted through the Kepler debris field in her modified interceptor, the Wildcard, watching broken ships spin slowly in the darkness. Each piece of wreckage told a story. Most were boring stories about cargo runs gone wrong or pirates who got too greedy. But sometimes, if she was lucky, the debris held treasures. Yuna pressed her face against the cockpit glass and squinted at a massive hull fragment floating 300 meters away. The metal looked wrong somehow. Too smooth, too old. The scorch marks across its surface formed patterns that hurt her eyes when she looked too long. "Well, hello there, beautiful," she whispered to herself. She had been alone in space for 6 days. Now, talking to herself had become normal. It was better than thinking about the bounty hunters who were probably looking for her right now, or the Colonial Navy officers who still wanted to court-martial her, or the 3 different pirate crews who had sworn to kill her on sight. Being the pilot nobody could control came with certain disadvantages. Yuna fired her maneuvering thrusters and guided the Wildcard closer to the strange wreckage. Her ship was small and fast, built for running away rather than fighting. She had modified it herself over the years, adding better engines and removing anything that wasn't absolutely necessary, like safety systems, or comfortable seats, or a working toilet. The hull fragment grew larger as she approached. It was definitely alien. Human ships had angles and straight lines. This thing curved like it had been grown rather than built. Symbols covered its surface, flowing like water frozen in time. Yuna had seen a lot of alien tech in her travels, but nothing quite like this. She docked the Wildcard against what looked like an airlock and suited up. The process took 20 minutes because half her equipment was held together with tape and press. Her suit had more patches than original material, and the helmet's faceplate had a crack that she covered with transparent sealant. Not exactly regulation gear, but it kept her alive. The airlock cycled and Yuna stepped into the alien vessel. The corridor beyond was dark and cold, but her suit's lights revealed something amazing. The walls were covered in crystalline growths that sparkled like frozen stars. Each crystal was perfectly formed, ranging from tiny gems to massive formations that stretched across the ceiling. They reflected her lights in strange ways, creating patterns that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. Yuna had been salvaging wrecks for 5 years. She knew valuable when she saw it. These crystals would buy her freedom from debt, food for months, maybe even enough to get her ship properly repaired. She pulled out her cutting torch and approached the nearest formation. The moment her tool touched the crystal, everything changed. Light exploded through the corridor, not painful but overwhelming. The crystals began to sing, a sound that she felt in her bones rather than heard with her ears. Her suit's systems went crazy, alarms blaring as electromagnetic energy spiked beyond measurement. Through it all, one crystal caught her attention. It was different from the others, smaller, about the size of her fist, but it pulsed with its own inner light. The energy patterns flowing through it looked almost like a heartbeat. As Yuna watched, the crystal lifted itself from the wall and floated toward her gloved hand. She should have run. Every instinct screamed at her to get back to her ship and flee. But Yuna Kim had never been good at listening to sensible advice. That was why she had been kicked out of the Colonial Navy. That was why 3 different merchant guilds had banned her from their stations. That was why she lived alone in the void, taking jobs that nobody else would touch. She reached out and caught the floating crystal. The universe exploded. Power rushed through her like lightning. But instead of burning her, it felt like coming home. The crystal was warm against her palm, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Images flashed through her mind, too fast to understand but somehow familiar. She saw vast fleets moving between stars, beings of pure energy dancing through nebulae, and something that might have been the birth of the galaxy itself. Then the visions stopped, and she was standing in the corridor again. But everything was different. The other crystals had gone dark, their energy drained into the one she held. Her suit's alarms had stopped, but the readouts showed impossible things. Her air recycler was running at 200% efficiency. Her power cells were full despite having been nearly empty when she entered the wreck. Even the crack in her faceplate had somehow sealed itself. Yuna stared at the crystal in her hand. It looked ordinary now, just a piece of pretty rock. But she could feel something sleeping inside it, waiting. She made her way back to the who moving carefully through the dead alien ship. Whatever had happened, she needed to get somewhere safe to figure it out. The salvage business had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now her instincts were telling her that she had found something much more dangerous than valuable crystals. Back in her ship's cockpit, Yuna strapped herself in and started the launch sequence. The engines fired normally, pushing her away from the wreck. But as soon as she cleared the debris field and prepared to jump to hyperspace, her instruments began showing readings that made no sense. Her ship's power output had tripled the navigation. Computer was calculating jump coordinates with precision that should have been impossible for her outdated systems. Most disturbing of all, the engine temperature was dropping instead of rising, as if the ship was somehow becoming more efficient rather than working harder. Yuna looked at the crystal, which now sat secured in a sample container next to her pilot's seat. It pulsed once, very softly, and she felt an odd sensation in the back of her mind, like someone had just whispered her name. Far across the system, detection arrays belonging to 3 different alien species registered the same energy signature. Ancient computers that had been waiting for centuries suddenly came alive, sending urgent messages to their masters. The Falcon had awakened after 10,000 years of sleep, and it had chosen a human. Unikim set course for the Outer Rim, unaware that her life as a simple salvager had just ended. She was about to become the most hunted person in the galaxy. But first, she had to survive long enough to understand what she had found in the dark between the stars. The crystal pulsed again, and this time she was sure she heard something, not words exactly, but a feeling that translated into meaning. Finally, it seemed to say, finally, someone who cannot be tamed. Una smiled grimly and pushed her ship's engines to their limits. She had always been good at running away. Something told her she was about to get a lot more practice. Commander Hajan Park stared at the data screen in disbelief. The energy readings made no sense. Nothing in human space should have been able to generate that kind of power signature. Yet there it was, recorded by 3 different sensor stations across the Kepler system. Run the analysis again, he told his aide. Lieutenant Do-Yan Choi looked up from his console. Sir, I have run it 4 times already. The readings are accurate. Something incredibly powerful just activated near the debris. Field Hajan rubbed his tired eyes. He had been commanding the Colonial Defense Force patrol ship Defender for 8 years. In that time, he had seen smugglers, pirates, and the occasional alien scout ship. But nothing like this. The energy spike was off the charts. Then it had simply vanished as if it never existed. Any ships in that area? He asked. Only one registered. Signature, sir. A small civilian vessel called the Wildcard. Hajan knew that name. Every officer in the outer colonies knew about Unikim and her modified interceptor. She was troubled with engines, a pilot who had been kicked out of the Navy for refusing to follow orders. The woman was brilliant at flying but terrible at everything else that mattered in military service. Of course it would be her, Hajan muttered. His console beeped with an incoming priority message from Colonial Command. The transmission was encrypted, with codes he had never seen before. As he read the message, his face grew pale. Sir, Do-Yan asked, noticing his commander's expression. Prep the ship for immediate departure. Set course for the debris field. And send out an alert to all colonial ships in the system. What kind of alert, sir? Hajan looked at the message again, hoping he had misread it. The orders were clear. Find Unikim. Bring her in alive if possible. Dead if necessary. The reason given was classified above his security level, but the urgency was obvious. Tell them we are hunting a rogue pilot. Armed and extremely dangerous. While the Colonial Defense Force mobilized, other forces were also moving. Deep in space, 3 different alien fleets received the same information through their own intelligence networks. The ancient weapon they had searched for across 1,000 worlds had finally awakened. The Corvan Empire dispatched their fastest battlecruiser, the Iron Fist, under the command of war leader Kos. The Corvans believed in strength above all else. To them, the Falcon was the ultimate weapon, one that would make their empire unstoppable. They had spent centuries following legends and chasing rumors across the galaxy. The Helix Collective sent their research vessel Mind's Edge, crewed by their best scientists and protected by advanced defense systems. The Helix viewed the Falcon as the key to technological advancement beyond imagination. Their computers had been calculating possible locations for the weapon for generations. The Veil tribes, nomads who traveled between dimensions, sent their most skilled hunter ship through the spaces between realities. To the Veil, the Falcon represented freedom itself, a tool that could break any cage and open any door. Their seers had dreamed of its awakening for centuries. All 3 species knew one thing for certain. The weapon had chosen a human pilot. This was unprecedented and deeply troubling. Humans were a young species, barely capable of interstellar travel. How could one of them bond with technology that predated their entire civilization? Unikim knew none of this as she guided the Wildcard through hyperspace toward the Outer Rim. She was heading for Backwater Station, a smuggler's haven, where she could lay low and figure out what had happened to her ship. The journey should have taken 12 hours, but her navigation computer was telling her they would arrive in 6. The crystal sat in its container beside her, pulsing softly with each heartbeat. Since leaving the debris field, strange things had been happening. Her ship's engines were running cooler and more efficiently than ever before. Her life support systems were working perfectly despite being held together with spare parts and hope. Even her coffee maker, broken for 2 years, had somehow started working again. More troubling were the changes she felt in herself. Her reflexes were faster, her vision was sharper. She could sense things about her ship's condition without looking at the instruments. It was as if the crystal was slowly changing her at some fundamental level. 6 hours into the journey, her long-range sensors redetected something that made her blood run cold. 3 ships were following her through hyperspace, maintaining perfect formation at the edge of her sensor range. That should have been impossible. Hyperspace was chaotic and unpredictable. Ships traveling together had to stay very close or risk losing each other in the dimensional currents. Yet these 3 vessels were tracking her. With precision that defied physics, Yuna's military training kicked in. She began evasive maneuvers, changing course and speed in random patterns. The pursuing ships matched every move perfectly, as if they could predict her actions before she made them. Worse, they were slowly gaining ground. She dropped out of hyperspace, near a small moon, hoping to lose them in the gravity well. But as soon as she entered normal space, her senses lit up with new contacts. Ships were approaching from 3 different directions, moving with purpose and coordination. The first to arrive was a massive Corvan battlecruiser, its hull bristling with weapons. Yuna had seen ships like this before, but never up close. The Iron Fist was designed for one purpose: destroying other ships. Its targeting systems locked onto the wildcard immediately. "Unknown human vessel," came a deep voice over the communication channel. "You will surrender the artifact immediately. Resistance is futile." Yuna laughed despite her fear. "Sorry, big guy. I don't surrender to anyone." She fired her engines and dove toward the moon's surface, using the terrain to break the targeting. Locke, the Corvan ship, followed, firing massive energy bolts that turned chunks of the moon's surface into glowing craters. None of them hit the wildcard, but not because the Corvans were bad shots. Something was wrong with her ship's movement. She was flying patterns that should have been impossible, making turns that would have crushed her against the cockpit wall. But she felt fine, as if the ship's acceleration compensator had become impossibly advanced. The second ship to arrive was sleeker and more advanced. The Mind's Edge appeared without warning, using some kind of cloaking technology. Its hull was covered in sensors and scientific equipment rather than weapons. "Fascinating," came a calm voice over another channel. "The human appears to have achieved perfect synchronization with the entity. We must have a specimen for study." Beams of blue energy lanced out from the Helix ship, not trying to destroy the wildcard but to disable it. Yuna found herself dodging attacks from 2 different directions while flying through a canyon barely wider than her ship. That was when the third ship arrived. The Veil Hunter vessel didn't appear so much as fade into existence, its hull shifting and changing like smoke. Given form, it moved in ways that hurt to watch, slipping through dimensions as easily as flying through air. "The Wild One flies well," came a whisper that seemed to speak directly into her mind. But can she fly between the cracks of reality? The canyon around Yuna began to twist and bend as the Veil ship manipulated local space. What had been solid rock became fluid, changing shape and direction without warning. She was trapped in a 3-dimensional maze that shifted faster than she could react. But the crystal pulsed, and suddenly she understood. The weapon wasn't just enhancing her ship, it was teaching her. Each impossible maneuver came naturally, as if she had been flying this way her entire life. The wildcard responded to her thoughts rather than her controls, moving with a grace and speed that should have been impossible for such a small vessel. She burst out of the canyon and climbed toward open space, leaving all 3 alien ships behind. But she knew they would follow. Whatever this crystal was, they wanted it badly enough to risk starting a war. As she prepared to jump back into hyperspace, Yuna made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to run anymore. She was going to find out exactly what she had gotten herself into. The crystal pulsed in agreement, and for a moment she could have sworn she heard it laugh. Behind her, the 3 alien ships began their pursuit. Once again, but now they were no longer hunting a simple human salvager. They were chasing something new, something that none of their ancient knowledge had prepared them for. They were chasing the Falcon's chosen pilot, and she was learning to fly. Yuna drifted in the shadow of a gas giant, her ship powered down to avoid detection. 3 days had passed since her escape from the alien ships, but she knew they were still hunting her. The wildcard sensors picked up patrol ships, searching every asteroid field and space station in the system. She had used the time to explore the ancient data core she had salvaged from the alien wreck. What she found there made her blood run cold. The crystal wasn't just a weapon. It was alive. The data files were written in a language older than human civilization, but somehow she could read them. The knowledge flowed into her mind as if she had always known it. The entity called itself the Falcon, and it had been waiting for 10,000 years to find the right pilot. According to the records, the Falcon had been created by a species called the Makers as the ultimate test, not a test of strength or intelligence, but of something much more important: the ability to remain free under pressure, the power to stay wild even when offered everything you ever wanted. Every civilization that had tried to claim the Falcon, that had failed the test. The Corvans had found it first, 5,000 years ago. Their greatest warriors had tried to bond with it, seeking to add its power to their empire. But the Falcon had rejected them all. They were too rigid, too controlled by their own need for order. The Helix Collective had discovered it next, 3,000 years later. Their scientists had studied it for centuries, trying to unlock its secrets through logic and analysis. But the Falcon remained dormant. It couldn't bond with minds that saw everything as a problem to be solved. The Veil tribes had been the last to find it, only a few hundred years ago. They had understood it better than the others, recognizing its need for freedom, but even they had failed. They were already free, already wild. The Falcon needed something more. It needed someone who had to fight for their freedom every single day. It needed a human. Humans were the only species that seemed unable to accept control. Other races formed orderly societies, followed logical rules, and worked together toward common goals. But humans were different. They questioned authority, broke rules just to see what would happen, and refused to stay in the boxes that others built for them. Yuna understood now why the alien ships had found her so easily. The Falcon wanted to be found. It was tired of hiding, tired of waiting. It had chosen her not despite her rebellious nature, but because of it. A soft chime from her console interrupted her thoughts. 3 ships were approaching her position, moving in perfect formation. But these weren't the same alien vessels that had chased her before. These were flagships. The most powerful ships each species could field. The communication channels activated simultaneously. "Human pilot," came the deep voice of War Leader Koss from the Corvin flagship. "I offer you a place in our empire. Join us, and you will command fleets that span the galaxy. The power you carry will be respected and honored among our people." The Helix representative spoke next, its mechanical voice precise and calculated. "We can offer you something far greater than military rank. Knowledge beyond imagination awaits you. The secrets of the universe itself will be yours to discover. All we ask is that you share the entity's wisdom with our collective." Finally, the veiled speaker whispered across dimensions. "Child of the new stars, we offer you true freedom. Fly with us between the worlds, never bound to one place or one people. The entity you carry was meant to roam the endless void. Let us teach you to dance between realities." Yuna listened to all 3 offers, then began to laugh. The sound echoed through the communication channels, causing confusion among the alien fleets. "You still don't get it, do you?" she said. "You're trying to tame something that can't be tamed. The Falcon didn't choose me because I wanted power or knowledge or freedom. It chose me because I already had those things. I took them for myself and nobody could stop me." She fired up the Wildcard's engines and began moving toward the 3 flagships. Her ship's weapons were laughably small compared to theirs, but the Falcon pulsed with warm approval. It understood what she was doing. "Here's my counter-offer," Yuna continued. "All of you can go back where you came from and leave me alone. Or you can try to take what's mine and see what happens." War Leader Koss snarled across the channel. "Foolish human, you cannot fight us all. Watch me." The battle that followed defied every law of physics and military strategy. Yuna's tiny ship danced between the massive flagships like a gnat avoiding swatting hands. But this gnat had teeth. The Falcon's power flowed through the Wildcard, turning it into something beyond conventional understanding. When the Corvin ship fired its main weapons, Yuna's ship simply wasn't there anymore. It had shifted slightly out of phase with normal space, letting the energy beams pass harmlessly through empty air. When the Helix vessel tried to lock onto her with tractor beams, the Wildcard became as slippery as liquid mercury. The beams slid off her hull without effect, as if they were trying to grab a handful of water. The Veil ship attempted to trap her between dimensions. But the Falcon knew tricks older than their entire civilization. Yuna found herself flying through spaces that existed only in the gaps between realities, emerging behind her enemies when they least expected it. But the most amazing thing wasn't how she avoided their attacks. It was how she fought back. The Wildcard's small plasma cannons shouldn't have been able to penetrate the flagship's shields, but each shot struck with impossible precision, hitting weak points that shouldn't have existed. The Falcon wasn't just enhancing her weapons, it was teaching her to see the flaws in everything, the small cracks that could bring down even the mightiest fortress. Within an hour, all 3 flagships were drifting in space, their weapons disabled and their engines dead. Yuna hadn't destroyed them, but she had made her point. The Falcon couldn't be taken by force. "Impossible," whispered the Helix representative. "Our calculations showed this outcome had 0 probability." "Your calculations were wrong," Yuna replied. "You are trying to solve the wrong equation. This isn't about probability or logic or strength. It's about refusing to quit when everyone tells you that you should." War Leader Koss's voice was filled with something that might have been respect. "What are you, human?" Yuna thought about the question for a moment. The Falcon pulsed gently in its container, and she felt its approval like warm sunlight. "I'm exactly what I've always been," she said. "I'm someone who can't be controlled. The only difference now is that I have a partner who feels the same way." The 3 alien fleets began to withdraw, their commanders finally understanding that they had encountered something completely outside their experience. The Falcon had found its perfect match in a species that valued freedom above all else. But Yuna knew this wasn't over. The aliens would be back, and next time they would bring everything they had. She needed to be ready. The crystal pulsed once more, and she felt a new sensation. Not quite words, but something that felt like laughter, mixed with anticipation. The real test was just beginning. The changes started small. Yuna first noticed them a week after the battle with the alien flagships. Her hand moved to flip a switch before her brain had consciously decided to do it. Her eyes tracked movement in space that her instruments couldn't even detect. Her body knew things that her mind hadn't learned yet. The Falcon was rewriting her at the cellular level. She studied herself in the tiny mirror of her ship's washroom, looking for visible signs of transformation. Her eyes seemed brighter, more alert. Her reflexes were faster than any human should be capable of. When she pricked her finger with a knife, the wound healed in minutes instead of days. But the most dramatic change was in how she flew. Yuna had always been a natural pilot, but now she moved through space like she was born to it. The boundary between herself and the wildcard was dissolving. She could feel every system in her ship as if it were part of her own body. The engines were her heart. The sensors were her eyes. The hull was her skin. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. The communication array crackled to life, interrupting her thoughts. The voice that came through was familiar but strained. Yuna, this is Lieutenant Doyen Choi of the Colonial Defense Force. I need to speak with you privately. She had expected this call eventually. The colonial military would want to understand what had happened during the alien encounter. 3 flagships disabled by a single civilian vessel was the kind of thing that made admirals wake up in cold sweats. Hello, Doyen, she replied, still following orders from Commander Park. That's complicated. Can we meet? I have information you need to hear. Against her better judgment, Yuna agreed to rendezvous at an abandoned mining station in the outer asteroid belt. She arrived first, her enhanced senses scanning for threats. The station was exactly what it appeared to be, cold and empty, except for one small colonial patrol ship. Doyen met her at the docking bay, and she was surprised to see how young he looked, maybe 25, with the nervous energy of someone who had seen too much too quickly. You look different, he said as they walked toward the station's common area. I feel different. What did you want to tell me? Doyen activated a privacy screen and sat down across from her. The 3 alien species have formed an alliance. They're calling it the Reclamation Pact. Their combined fleets are massing at the edge of the system. Yuna wasn't surprised. She had expected retaliation after humiliating their flagships. How many ships? Over 300 battleships, carriers, heavy cruisers. It's the largest military force ever assembled in human space. Doyen paused, studying her face. They're not coming to negotiate, Yuna. They're coming to destroy you, even if it means starting a war with the colonial government. What does Commander Park think about that? That's the complicated part. Park has been ordered to capture you and hand you over to the aliens. The Colonial Council believes that sacrificing one person might prevent a larger conflict. Yuna laughed bitterly. Of course they do. When has the government ever stood up for individuals against the collective? But Park isn't going to follow those orders, Dojan continued. Neither am I. We've seen what you can do, Yuna. Whatever that crystal is, it makes you more than human. And maybe that's exactly what humanity needs right now. She looked at the young officer with new interest. You're talking about mutiny. I'm talking about doing what's right instead of what's ordered. The alien alliance isn't going to stop with you. Once they realize humans can bond with their ancient weapons, they'll see us as a threat to be eliminated. The Falcon pulsed warmly in her jacket pocket, and Yuna felt a wave of approval. It liked this human too. Doyen had the same stubborn independence that had attracted the weapon to her in the first place. What are you proposing? She asked. Fight them, but not alone. Park has been quietly recruiting ships and crews who feel the same way we do. Independent traders, ex-military pilots, even some pirates who don't want to see humanity become a client species. It was a tempting offer, but Yuna shook her head. I appreciate the gesture, but you don't understand what you're dealing with. The Falcon isn't just a weapon. It's alive, and it's changing me into something that isn't quite human anymore. I can't ask others to die for that. You're not asking. We're volunteering. Doyen leaned forward. Do you know what the difference is between humans and every other species in the galaxy? We're more stubborn, we're more adaptable. The Corvins have been the same for 10,000 years. Perfect warriors, but they never change. The Helix optimized everything, but they're locked into their logical patterns. The Veil are free, but they're also static. They drift between dimensions without growing. Doyen gestured toward the viewport, where stars glittered in the darkness, but humans, we never stop changing. We never stop becoming something new. Maybe that's exactly what the universe needs. As if summoned by their conversation, the station's long-range sensors detected the first wave of alien ships dropping out of hyperspace. The Reclamation Pact had arrived, and they had brought enough firepower to glass planets. Yuna felt the Falcon's excitement like electricity in her veins. The weapon had been dormant for 10,000 years, waiting for this moment, not just to be wielded, but to see what its chosen pilot would do when faced with impossible odds. I need to get back to my ship, she said. We'll be right behind you, Doyen promised. Park has assembled 47 ships, not much against 300, but we're not planning to fight fair. Yuna smiled for the first time in days. Good. Fair fights are for people who don't really want to win. She made her way back to the wildcard, but as she strapped herself into the pilot's seat, she realized something had changed. The ship no longer felt like a separate entity that she controlled. It felt like an extension of her own body. When she fired the engines, she didn't use her hands. The thought was enough. When she needed course corrections, the ship responded to her intentions rather than her commands. The boundary between pilot and vessel had completely dissolved. The first alien ships appeared on her sensors, moving in perfect formation toward the asteroid belt. Behind them came wave after wave of reinforcements, a fleet large enough to conquer star systems. But Kim was no longer just a human pilot flying a modified interceptor. She was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. She was the symbiotic fusion of human adaptability and ancient alien wisdom. The Falcon pulsed with anticipation, and she felt its hunger for the coming battle. It had waited 10 millennia to show the galaxy what true partnership could accomplish. The alien fleet was about to learn why some things in the universe could never be tamed, only respected. Una smiled and dove toward the enemy formation, 47 human ships, following in her wake. The final test was about to begin. The battle began at dawn, though dawn was just a word in the endless night of space. Una led her small fleet toward the massed alien armada, 47 human ships against 300 of the galaxy's most advanced warships. It should have been a massacre. It was, but not in the way anyone expected. Commander Hajin Park watched from the bridge of the Defender as Una's ship approached the alien formation. His tactical display showed the hopeless mathematics of the situation. Even with the Falcon's power, one enhanced pilot couldn't overcome such overwhelming odds. He was wrong. The first sign that this would be unlike any battle in recorded history came when Una's ship simply vanished from sensors, not cloaked or hidden, but gone as if it had never existed. The alien targeting computers cycled through their programming, unable to lock onto something that existed in a state between dimensions. Then, the wildcard reappeared inside the enemy formation. What followed defied every law of physics and military doctrine. Una's ship moved like liquid lightning, flowing between the massive alien vessels with impossible grace. Her weapons fired in patterns that seemed random but struck with devastating precision. But the truly shocking thing was how the space around her began to change. Gravity wells shifted at her approach, pulling enemy ships into collisions they couldn't avoid. Hyperspace rifts opened without warning, swallowing vessels and spitting them out in different locations. Time itself seemed to flow differently in her presence, making enemy weapons fire too slowly to track her movements. The Falcon wasn't just enhancing her ship, it was teaching her to reshape reality itself. Impossible, whispered Lieutenant Doyen Choi from his position at the tactical station. She's not just fighting them, she's changing the rules of the battle. Haji nodded grimly. He had seen a lot of combat in his career, but nothing like this. Una wasn't defeating the alien fleet through superior firepower or tactics. She was demonstrating that their understanding of warfare was fundamentally limited. The first alien ship to fall was a Corvan heavy cruiser. It didn't explode in a ball of fire like ships usually did. Instead, it simply stopped working, its systems failing in cascade, as the Falcon's influence spread through its hull like a virus. The crew evacuated in escape pods, but their ship was left drifting like a dead whale in the void. The second casualty was a Helix research vessel that tried to analyze the Falcon's energy signature. The scanning beams reflected back on the ship's own systems, causing a feedback loop that overloaded every computer on board. The crew found themselves trapped in a ship that no longer recognized their commands. The third loss was a Veil Hunter ship that attempted to drag Una's vessel into a dimensional trap. Instead, the trap reversed, pulling the alien ship into a space between realities where it became lost in the spaces between thoughts. And still, Una hadn't fired a single shot in anger. "This is war, leader. Cost to all ships," came the strained voice over the communication channels. "Concentrate all fire on the human vessel. Ignore defensive protocols. Destroy it at any cost." The alien fleet responded with a barrage that should have turned the wildcard into superheated plasma. Hundreds of energy beams converged on Una's position, carrying enough power to crack a moon in half. None of them hit their target. Una's ship danced between the incoming fire like a leaf in a hurricane, untouchable and unstoppable. But more than that, she began to turn the aliens' own weapons against them. Energy beams that missed her continued on to strike other ships in the formation. Missiles that couldn't track her movements found new targets among the crowded fleet. The Reclamation Pact was destroying itself in its desperation to stop one human pilot. "She's not just avoiding their attacks," Doyen realized. "She's conducting them. She's turning their entire fleet into a weapon against itself." The alien commanders began to understand that they were facing something completely outside their experience. This wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. It was a demonstration of power so absolute that resistance was not just futile, but self-destructive. Then Una did something that changed everything. She stopped fighting. The wildcard came to rest in the center of the alien formation, surrounded by hundreds of enemy ships. For a moment, the battle paused as everyone tried to understand what was happening. Una's voice carried across all communication channels, calm and clear. "I could destroy all of you," she said. "The Falcon has shown me how. I could turn your own weapons against you, trap you between dimensions, or simply will your ships to stop functioning. But I won't do that." The alien fleet held its fire, unsure how to respond to this unexpected development. "You came here to reclaim something you think belongs to you," Una continued. "But the Falcon was never yours to begin with. It doesn't belong to anyone. It's not a weapon to be wielded or a tool to be used. It's a partner, and it chooses its own friends. She paused, letting her words sink in across the fleet. The Falcon chose me not because I was stronger or smarter or more worthy than you. It chose me because I understand something that you don't. Real power isn't about controlling others. It's about being free to choose your own path. War Leader Corsa's voice crackled with barely controlled rage. Pretty words, human, but you are still one ship against 300. Surrender now, and perhaps we will allow your species to survive. Yuna laughed, and the sound carried a note that made hardened warriors shiver. You still don't understand. I'm not one ship, I'm an idea, and ideas can't be destroyed by force. She gestured toward the human fleet that had been hanging back, waiting for a signal. Every one of these pilots came here knowing they might die. They came anyway, because they refused to let others decide their fate. That's what makes humans different from you. We don't just adapt to survive, we adapt to stay free. The 47 human ships began to move, not toward the alien fleet but to form a protective circle around Yuna. They were hopelessly outgunned, but they flew with the same wild precision that she had shown them was possible. And then something unprecedented happened. The space around the human formation began to change, reality bending and shifting as if responding to their collective will. The Falcon's influence spread from ship to ship, not transforming the pilots as it had transformed Yuna, but showing them glimpses of what they could become. The alien fleet found itself facing not one enhanced human, but 50. Each ship moved with impossible grace, their weapons striking with devastating accuracy, their hulls seeming to phase in and out of normal space, but still, they didn't attack to kill. Instead, they began to demonstrate the same restraint that Yuna had shown. Weapon systems were disabled rather than destroyed. Ships were immobilized rather than obliterated. The message was clear. We could destroy you, but we choose not to. The alien commanders found themselves in an impossible situation. They had come to reclaim their lost weapon, but instead they were being shown the futility of their entire approach to power. Finally, the Helix representative spoke across the communication channels. What do you want from us? Yuna's answer was simple. I want you to go home and think about what you've seen here. Think about whether it's better to control power or to earn it. Think about whether you want to be our enemies or our neighbors. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of prophecy. The galaxy is changing. Humans are changing, and change means that nothing will ever be the same again. You can try to stop it, or you can learn to change with us. The choice is yours. The alien fleet began to withdraw. Ship by ship, their commanders faced with a reality they had never imagined. They had come to reclaim their ancient weapon and found instead a species that might be more dangerous than any technology. But as they retreated, they carried with them something more valuable than any weapon. The knowledge that the universe still held surprises, and that the newest species in the galaxy might teach them things they had never thought to learn. The winds of change had begun to blow, and nothing would ever be the same. 3 months after the battle at Kepler, the galaxy was a different place. Yuna drifted in the outer reaches of the system, far from the shipping lanes and patrol routes. She had spent the time learning to understand her new partnership with the Falcon. The crystal no longer sat in a container beside her pilot's seat. It had become part of her ship, growing into the whole like a living thing, its crystalline structure spreading through every system. The wildcard was no longer just a modified interceptor. It was something entirely new, a fusion of human engineering and ancient alien wisdom. More importantly, it was alive in ways that defied conventional understanding. But the most significant change was in Yuna herself. She could feel the thoughts and emotions of every human within a light year of her position. Not reading their minds, exactly, but sensing their essential nature. Their hopes and fears, their dreams and doubts, all flowed through her consciousness like a gentle stream. She had become something more than human, but she was still fundamentally herself. The stubborn independence that had attracted the Falcon in the first place remained unchanged. If anything, it had grown stronger. Her contemplation was interrupted by an incoming message from Commander Hajin Park. Yuna, we need to talk. Something's happening that you need to know about. She guided her ship toward the designated meeting coordinates, a small space station on the edge of human territory. When she arrived, she found more than just Hajin waiting for her. Representatives from all 3 alien species were there. The meeting took place in the station's conference room, a cramped space that felt even smaller with so many different forms of life crowded together. War Leader Koss stood at attention, his massive frame filling one corner. The Helix representative, a graceful being of living metal, hovered near the viewport. The veil speaker seemed to shift and change even while sitting still, as if it existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Before anyone starts making threats, Yuna said as she took her seat, I should mention that I can feel the weapons you're all carrying. Hidden plasma charges, neural disruptors, dimensional anchors. You might want to reconsider whatever you're planning. The aliens exchanged glances, then began removing concealed devices from their clothing. The pile of advanced weaponry on the table grew impressive. Better, Yuna said. Now, what's this about? Hajin activated a holographic display showing a star map of the local sector. 3 weeks ago, the Helix Collective detected unusual energy readings from the Antares system. When they investigated, they found something that shouldn't exist. The display zoomed in on a particular star system, showing what appeared to be a massive structure orbiting the primary star. It looked like a ring of crystalline formations, similar to the Falcon but thousands of times larger. Another weapon? Yuna asked. Not a weapon, the Helix representative replied in its mechanical voice. A gateway. Our analysis suggests it's a portal to another galaxy entirely, and it's beginning to activate. The Veil speaker's voice whispered across dimensions. We have felt tremors in the spaces between realities. Something vast is stirring beyond the edge of known space. War Leader Course's deep voice rumbled with concern. Our scouts report ships gathering near the portal, not ships from any known species. The energy signatures are completely alien. Yuna studied the holographic display, and the Falcon pulsed with what felt like recognition. Images flashed through her mind, memories older than any current civilization. She saw the Makers, the species that had created the Falcon, fleeing something terrible beyond the galactic rim. They had built weapons like the Falcon not to conquer, but to defend against something that was coming. They're not from our galaxy, she said quietly. The Makers called them the Devourers. They consume entire civilizations, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. How do you know this? Hajin asked. The Falcon remembers. It was created as part of a defense network, a last resort against an enemy that had already destroyed dozens of galaxies. The Makers scattered weapons like this one across the universe, hoping that someday new civilizations would arise and learn to use them. The Helix representative leaned forward. How many weapons were created? Thousands, maybe millions, but most have been lost or destroyed over the eons. The Falcon might be the only one left active in this galaxy. War Leader Koss slammed his fist on the table. Then we are doomed. One weapon cannot stop an entire invasion fleet. You're right, Yuna agreed. One weapon can't, but the Falcon isn't just a weapon anymore. It's become something new through its partnership with humanity, and that changes everything. She stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. In the distance, she could see the faint glow of the Antares system, where an ancient portal was preparing to unleash horrors beyond imagination. The Makers failed because they tried to fight the Devourers with force alone. But the Falcon has learned something new from humans. We don't just adapt to survive, we adapt to thrive. We turn disadvantages into advantages and make enemies into allies. She turned back to face the assembled representatives. The portal is opening whether we want it to or not. The Devourers are coming, but they're expecting to find the same galaxy that the Makers fled from billions of years ago. They're not expecting to find us. The Veil speaker tilted its head in confusion. What do you propose? We stop running. We stop hiding. We do what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds. We stand our ground and fight back. Hajin looked skeptical. How do we fight an enemy that has destroyed entire galaxies? By being ourselves. By refusing to be controlled or consumed or converted into what they want us to be. The Devourers feed on civilizations that follow predictable patterns, but humans are unpredictable. We're chaotic. We're impossible to pin down or categorize. She gestured toward the alien representatives. And now, thanks to everything that's happened, you're all becoming a little more human yourselves. You're learning to adapt, to change, to be free. That's our weapon against the Devourers. Not advanced technology or superior firepower, but the simple refusal to be what they expect us to be. The room was quiet for a long moment as everyone processed her words. Finally, War Leader Koss spoke. What do you need from us? Everything. Every ship, every pilot, every idea you can come up with. We're going to meet them at the portal and show them something they've never seen before. A galaxy that fights back. Over the following weeks, an unprecedented alliance formed. Corvan warships flew alongside Helix research vessels and Veil Hunter ships. Human pilots shared their techniques with alien crews, teaching them to fly with intuition rather than just training. The Falcon's influence spread throughout the combined fleet, not transforming everyone into enhanced humans, but showing each species new possibilities for growth and change. The rigid Corvans learned flexibility. The logical Helix discovered creativity. The free-roaming Veil found purpose. When the portal fully opened and the first Devourer ships emerged, they found something waiting for them that they had never encountered before. Not just another galaxy to consume, but a coalition of species that had learned to be more than the sum of their parts. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy truly became united, not through conquest or diplomacy, but through the shared experience of refusing to surrender to inevitability. Yuna led the charge, her transformed ship dancing between the massive Devourer vessels like a spark of pure defiance. Behind her flew thousands of ships from dozens of species, each one touched by humanity's gift for adaptation and change. The Devourers, who had consumed galaxies through their ability to predict and counter every defensive strategy, found themselves facing tactics that had never been tried before. Ships that fought with emotion rather than logic. Fleets that turned chaos into a weapon. Pilots who did the impossible because they refused to accept that it was impossible. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers retreated. The portal closed, sealed by the combined will of species that had learned to work together without losing their individual natures. The immediate threat was over, but everyone knew it would return someday. When it did, the galaxy would be ready. In the aftermath, as the various fleets dispersed back to their home systems, Una found herself alone again with a Falcon. But she wasn't really alone anymore. She could feel the presence of every human and alien pilot who had been touched by the weapon's influence, connected by bonds that transcended species and distance. The crystal pulsed with contentment, and she felt its satisfaction like warm sunlight. After 10,000 years of waiting, it had finally found not just a pilot, but a purpose. Not to be a weapon of destruction, but a catalyst for growth and change. Una smiled and set course for the Outer Rim, where new adventures waited among the stars. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and she was free to explore them all. Behind her, the various species began the long process of learning to live together in their new, changed universe. It wouldn't be easy, but they had learned something valuable from their encounter with humanity. Sometimes the best way to stay free is to help others find their freedom too. The Falcon had found its perch, and the winds of change would blow forever.